Okay, moving on to motion 10. Can we ask for someone to move the motion? Councillor Richard Watt, is it yourself? Or is it Darren Watt? Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and good afternoon, fellow councillors. It's proven that excessive noise, strong lights and sleep deprivation can have a massive effect on mental and physical health. The FBI and CIA use these tactics in situations like Waco. Fife council communities are being subjected to these conditions on a regular basis for days on end. It must have an effect on mental and physical health. These are not my comments, but these are one of the many hundreds, if not thousands, of comments made on social media regarding the recent events at Mossmorran. Now, don't get me wrong, it may seem a bit extreme to be comparing the sights, sounds and vibrations from the flaring at Mossmorran to tactics used by security services in the US crisis situations, but believe me, as a local resident, that person may very well have a point. The noise and sounds have been compared to thunder, jumbo jets and helicopters, and this noise was consistent and droning throughout the night and throughout the day and could be heard for miles on end. The light was of course the flickering of the flame from the stack, and the intensity was fierce and sporadic at times. This was incredibly worrying and disturbing, especially at night time when we had clear nights and the sky was fully lit up. Author Ian Rankin posted a tweet saying, "It looks like hell." The vibrations and rumbling had to be felt to be believed. One evening when it was particularly loud, my wife and I stepped out our front door and you could instantly feel it in the air. The vibrations in your ears was like standing next to roadworks, and it was a very surreal experience. Some residents even complained of a foul and chemical smell in the atmosphere for days on end. Now this just gives you a small element of what residents from across Cowdenbeath, Logelly, Cardendane and beyond experienced. However, that doesn't give you the full picture. There are tens of thousands of residents affected by the flaring at Mossmorran, and many of them are quite satisfied that flaring is a necessary safety feature and is part and parcel of the plant. Fair enough. But what many cannot and will not accept is the sheer number of unplanned or unscheduled flarings we've had to endure in recent years. Briefly, for those who don't know what I mean by unplanned flaring, I will explain. If ExxonMobil are due to carry out maintenance or improvements, they alert the public in advance that they will be flaring and advise us there is no reason to be concerned. Again, most residents can actually accept that. However, unplanned flaring is just that, unplanned. Something has obviously gone wrong that has upset the process, and for safety reasons, they need to flare. This is when it is deeply concerning and worrying for residents. They are often left for many hours with no explanation whatsoever, meaning they take to social media to seek answers and assurances. This recently has resulted in increased levels of anxiety and uncertainty, especially when dramatic photos emerge from various locations throughout the area. During this particular recent event, black smoke was seen bellowing out from the stack and could be again seen for miles. Now, regardless whether flaring is planned or not, black smoke is a very rare sight and can be extremely alarming. Now, credit where it's due, ExxonMobil did in fact improve their methods of communication since the initial unplanned event back in June 2017. However, even with the introduction of a simple Twitter account, it took them a couple of hours to issue their first statement acknowledging Easter Sunday's incident. By that point, it was far too late. Social media was flooded with concerns, complaints from anxious residents who were desperately seeking answers and assurances. This simply isn't good enough. Residents had already lost confidence in ExxonMobil, but this event is the straw that's broke the camel's back. Residents are quite rightly not just asking whether the plant is in fact now fit for purpose, but are also asking what on earth is spewing out of there, and not just during flaring, but all year round. Mossmorran that very question for years and have sadly made little progress. And this is not from the lack of trying or lack of action, but from the unwillingness from any agency or organisation to commit to carry out air quality monitoring, let alone studying the wider health and social impacts. I've even directly asked ExxonMobil if they would fund an independent impact study, but to no avail. This lack of willingness and openness only exacerbates residents further and has eroded trust and confidence to an all-time low. People are rightly asking questions about the possible impacts flaring has on their health and well-being, and although we're consistently assured by ExxonMobil that there is no reason for concern, that doesn't help the situation. So I ask, why is it hundreds are complaining of pre-existing conditions such as asthma and COPD have worsened? Why is it so many people are complaining of nausea, headaches, stinging eyes and difficulties breathing? People from a wider radius such as Lochaber, Hullbeef and Kelty have complained of such issues. One person from Dunfermline says, I have a constant cough and very breathless. Another from Legally is described having a bad taste at the back of her throat and tightness in her chest. Now, these are not some members of Extinction Rebellion infiltrating our local communities on social media pursuing their own agenda. These are real people with real concerns. These are ordinary, decent people with family and friends. These are people desperately worried and feel completely ignored and isolated. So it's only right and proper that as one of the local councillors, I am here today representing them and seeking a resolution that will help provide the surrounding communities the much needed assurances and peace of mind they deserve. An independent impact study is the only acceptable and sensible way forward. The Scottish Environment Protection Agency, commonly known as SEPA, do investigate when incidents occur, but it's clear they simply lack the resources and expertise to properly investigate the short and long-term impacts Mossmorran has on our residents and in our communities. Not only that, SEPA's previous inability to take any meaningful action against site operators has made residents question SEPA's competency and ability. There surely can be absolutely no doubt in your minds how distressed and anxious residents throughout Fife are right now. Your inboxes have been flooded with emails urging you to support this motion, and although I didn't encourage such actions, I very much welcome it. Nearly 200 residents actively engaged in local politics, and at a time when people are losing faith in their local elected representatives. This is unprecedented. Furthermore, over 3,400 people have signed a petition online demanding action, and SEPA have received over 927 individual complaints to the 24-hour pollution hotline, one of the highest number, if not the highest number, for any single event. Before I conclude, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Councillor Linda Holt for unwavering support and guidance throughout. Also, I must thank and praise James Glenn, Michelle Jarrett and Richard Innes from Mossmorran Action Group for their strength and resilience over the last 2 years, and particularly the last couple of weeks. Most of all, I'd like to thank the people affected by this for their trust, support and patience. This has been an incredibly stressful and demanding situation for many of us. However, this is very much the first step in the beginning of new hope, and I trust you will do what's right by the people of Fife and fully support this motion. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tree.
Deputy Provost, I wrote a big 4-page spiel on this, but after all day long we've been mentioning Mossmorran and that, it's come out in a few conversations. All I can say is I support Councillor Watt's motion.
Can we have a mover for the first amendment? That's by the Labour Group.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I think virtually all of us in this chamber from all of the groups are very concerned with particularly the recent flaring incident, but going back as well, the history of this site. And so I think there is general consensus that we do need some kind of independent expert study. Just to go back, I'll read out our amendment. Right, the Council notes the series of meetings convened by Leslie Laird MP, bringing together Shell, ExxonMobil, SEPA, HSE, the Council, elected and community representatives, which have been positive in improving communications between these groups and encouraging further action by the companies and by SEPA, The Council believes, however, that the most recent flaring incident, one of the most severe experienced at the plant, shows that the frequency and severity of flaring incidents is unacceptable to local communities in the surrounding area. Council therefore agrees, one, request the Scottish Government to commission an independent expert study of the environmental, social and health impacts on the surrounding communities of the operation of Shell's NGL plant and ExxonMobil's Fife ethylene plant at Mossmorran. 2, to engage again directly with SEPA and the companies to discuss the action needed to prevent and minimise incidents of flaring at the plant. 3, press SEPA to take strong enforcement action based on previous final warning letters, the best available techniques BAT assessment issued this week, and its formal regulatory investigation into the most recent flaring incident. 4, to seek appropriate and substantial compensation from the companies to individuals and communities affected by flaring incidents. And 5, to seek discussions with the Scottish and UK governments, the companies and trade unions regarding the long-term future of the plant and a possible strategy for its decommissioning. As I said, Provost, I think there is general agreement on the need for an independent inquiry expert study into this, and I think that appears really in all the motions and amendments here. We felt it was necessary to add and strengthen in a comprehensive way the original motion, and that's what we've done in these points. I think the work that was done by Leslie Laird in convening that meeting on a cross-party basis, and all the other representatives that have been there as well, I think was making progress, and I think we have seen some improvements. But quite honestly, this last example of flaring has been a tipping point, and it's no longer good enough to move on an incremental basis. We need to see some firm action now, and that is based on an independent expert study. Where we're suggesting, as the movers of the motion, suggesting that the Scottish Government should be asked to commission that, and I know that slightly differs from our colleagues in the next amendment. We feel the Scottish Government is responsible for the main regulatory functions on this, and it is a major strategic facility, and getting the Scottish Government to actually commission this gives it more of a status and more clout than it would if the Council did that. If they won't, then I think we reconsider our position and maybe go ahead as well. But we think in the first instance we should at least ask them if they will take responsibility for leading on this. The second point again is engaging with SEPA and the companies. We have been talking to them, but again we need to go back and see what is going to happen, in the long term. Are they going to be able to control these incidents and mitigate them, or are we going to go on seeing more and more incidents like we have seen? The third point about it's not just clearing it for the future. SEPA does need to step up to the plate and take strong enforcement action. We've seen a number of final warning letters, but nobody actually knows what the real impact of that has been. They have announced another investigation into that, and I think we need to be in close contact with them, pushing them to actually take all enforcement action they possibly can to prevent this in the future. I think that, again, just going back to the SNP amendment, I don't have any issue with reports and issues being discussed and going to the appropriate committee, but I don't think that on its own is good enough. We need to be round the table, eyeball to eyeball with them, pushing them to get on and do what we need to do, and to understand that, and officers should be very much involved in that as well. Fourth point, I know the companies do contribute small amounts to local trust funds, but this has a huge impact on those local communities and on some of the individuals in them, and we think that the companies should be again stepping up to the plate and providing a degree of substantial and appropriate compensation to those communities to offset the hardships and the impact on their quality of life that they're having to suffer. Finally, I think and this maybe does sound a bit kind of out of the box, but I think we should be initiating discussions with Scottish and UK governments and the companies and the trade unions about the long-term future of that plant. And is there a possible strategy that we should be starting to put in place that looks at its decommissioning? Nobody in our group is suggesting that's something that happens immediately overnight or even in the near or medium future. But we do think, given the impact it is having on local communities, that can we give them some light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how far ahead that is, that this may stop someday. And secondly, it does impact on the whole climate change and sustainable energy debate. And if we're serious in Scotland about moving to sustainable energy for the future, then this is one of the main facilities that we need to address. So, Council, we believe this represents a stronger and more comprehensive position that recognises the impact and tries to do as much as we possibly can about it.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor.
Deputy Provost, I rise to support the Labour amendment submitted to motion 10. I, like every councillor, have received a plethora of letters from the operators of Mossmorran plants since the last spate of flaring commenced. SEPA have been more active too in their distribution of correspondence. I accept that the operators of Mossmorran have been engaged in discussions with stakeholders over the last year. However, I believe that this involvement is a little too late. It took the operators 34 years to speak to us. This is after years of calls for representatives to attend community councils, whether it be Lochgelly or Cowdenbeath or Lunfinnans. Meetings were met with, "We don't do that." I'll express my own personal view about the ethylene plant. I believe it should never have been built in an area where thousands of people were expected to live alongside the horrors of regular flaring. And whilst I understand that this is a safety mechanism, the instances of this flaring are becoming more frequent and increasing in length as the plant heads towards 40 years of operation. Let me explain what flaring is like for my household. We live with a constant noise akin to a Nimrod plane taking off across our roof, and trust me, I have had that experience, so I know what I'm talking about. Near the top of Lochgelly, houses shake and rattle and the noise is unbearable. The sky is lit like Dante's Inferno. The last flaring commenced with a sustained huge plume of black smoke belching out from the plant. Goodness knows what impurities and poisons drifted across Fife that first day. Now we, in the immediate vicinity of the plant, are expected to be bought off for this inconvenience with a few pantomime tickets, invitations to a Burns supper once a year, and even some have enjoyed hospitality at international rugby matches. Some small assistance has been given to schools in our area. However, when it was discovered that one of our schools hadn't been included, St Patrick's Primary School, the operators refused to include them. This is not only insulting to the people who live in our area, and I hope that, like Lochgelly Community Council a number of years ago, communities and councillors will refuse to take the bungs that are on offer from the Mossmorran. So here we are in 2019, another year on, and still being subjected to the fires of hell from the plant. Last year, SEPA recognised that flaring was preventable, avoidable, and issues a final warning. What does that mean? Nobody knows. There's plenty documented evidence on the SEPA page to tell you how often the flaring and how sustained the flaring has been. And despite all that, it took till 2017 for a Robert Morris to attend a meeting of the Mossmorran Action Group. Many promises were made when Mossmorran was being built and constructed, especially hundreds of local jobs, which I have to say never materialised. What we have received 36 years on is a plant I believe that's outlived its safe working life. Citizens believe their physical and mental health have been affected by the plant, that the air quality is at very least compromised. The refusal for years to put in real-time air monitoring has not helped this situation. Everyone living in the vicinity of this plant is living with a time bomb waiting to blow, and a very large part of the Cowdenbeath area with it when it does. The devastation will be akin to a major nuclear explosion. All this risk for a few Panto tickets, the chance to attend a posh burn supper, sorry, that's not for me. The time for reassuring correspondence has passed. Time to consider the safety of thousands of people who live in the area and look at the eventual decommissioning of the plant. And the only correspondence I want as a councillor and as a resident of Lokelly is the one that tells me as Mossmorran is no more. Thank you.
Can we have a mover for the second amendment? Councillor Petrino.
Madam Deputy Provost, am I right in thinking you would want me to read out the second amendment?
Yes, please.
Okay. Council shares the concerns which have been expressed by the local and wider communities about emissions from the Shell NGL plant and ExxonMobil's Fife ethylene plant at Mossmorran. Council agrees that there is a need to commission an independent expert study of the environmental, social and health impacts on the surrounding communities of the operations of site, but believes the Council is best placed to drive this forward, working with SEPA, NHS Fife and the Mossmorran and Brayfoot Bay Independent Air Quality Review Group. Council also welcomes that the Mossmorran and Brayfoot Independent Air Quality Review Group has expressed a wish for its scope to be extended to cover the monitoring of light, sound and vibration, in addition to air quality, and that the operators of the plant would continue to meet the costs of this in line with their responsibilities under the original planning consent. Council considers that in commissioning the additional study, the Council can better control the extent and pace of the initiative, and agrees as a first step that SEPA, NHS Fife and the management at Mossmorran and Brayfoot Bay be invited to meet with the Environment, Protective Services and Community Safety Committee at its next meeting. Madam Provost, the breadth and depth of the concern that has been expressed by the local community demands a response from the Council, and that concern has been ably described by Councillor Watt in moving the motion. And that is why, and that's addressed in the very first paragraph of this amendment that I'm putting down today. I would like to go with the motion, but I can't. Councillor Watt says he's seeking a resolution. Yes, so am I. But if I give away or don't use the authority that the Council has to effect a solution, then I might never get one. We can ask the Scottish Government to carry out an independent review. It might well do that this year, next year. And when it does, if it does, what will it look at? Will it look at the parameters that need to be looked at? And if it doesn't, what are we going to do about it? And what happens? We can look at it again. And we've lost what? A year, year and a half, 2 years. And the local communities continue to suffer. So I can't go with the motion. Looking at the First Amendment, Councillor Ross says we need action now. And so we do. I support that wholeheartedly. But in asking somebody else to do it means we might not get that action now. We might have to wait for it, as I have already described. Councillor Ross has said we would need close contact, eyeball to eyeball. I couldn't agree more. And that's why I want to get the management of Mossmorran and Brayfoot and NHS in particular to meet with the Environment and Protective Services and Community Safety Committee. It's a formal meeting. We will enjoy closer and more meaningful eyeball to eyeball contact than has ever been managed hitherto. The Second Amendment says we will press SEPA on the basis of the final warning letter. SEPA have already issued a statement about what they're going to do as a consequence of all of the complaints that they've had, all 957 of them. They have deployed a full regulatory and scientific response. Great stuff. What does that mean? And what will it affect at the end of the day? That's why the council must be controlling this, to make sure that the outcome is what the council wants and what the community wants. Compensation. Yes, these people deserve compensation. I'm not an expert in litigation. What's the chances of getting it? And we're going to seek compensation. What does that mean? If we're simply going to ask the companies to suitably compensate the communities and individuals, or are we going to start civil action on their behalf? I need to know what it means, Madam Deputy Provost, before I will commit myself to it. There is also decommissioning. That might well be the answer, but I'm not going to be a party to looking to decommission anything until I've had appropriate advice from the relevant council officers, and I think for me to do otherwise would be irresponsible. I like the idea of directly engaging with SEPA, and I've already touched on that, and I will return to it. There is without doubt justification for an independent review, but the council is best placed to commission that review, and it must include light, sound and vibration. We've no guarantee that if somebody else does it, that these parameters will be addressed. There might be other parameters. That's why I want to meet with the NHS. I want to get the NHS advice about what health parameters need to be looked at in this independent review. Because if we don't specify it in the beginning, we will never get it. The council must control the study, not in terms of the parameters that we'll look at, but the pace at which it will be done. And if you're paying the piper, then you can call the tune. And happily, we don't have to pay the piper, because the companies have said they will already foot that bill. I need to get agreement from them that they'll meet the bill for the specification that the council sets down. And on the basis of what they said so far, I'm confident that that will be the case. The study must be well informed. I have already said that. I want appropriate action. I want meaningful action. I want it now. And if the meeting shares my views, they will support this amendment.
Can we have a seconder? Councillor Barrett.
Of course, like everyone else, we must acknowledge the genuine concerns and distress caused by the prolonged flaring. The concerns are legitimate and people are rightly fearful for the impact that it's had. We are agreed on carrying out a study. The SNP amendment simply calls for us to get on with it and do it now. Exxon and Shell are the culprits, and they should fit the bill for this study, not the public purse. We have a mechanism to help that happen. Please support.
Can I now open the matter up for debate? Councillor Craig.
Sorry, I didn't expect to be first, but I'm very happy to be first. I wasn't going to speak on this actually, but I have just a few points that I do want to make, and they're probably clarificationary. I don't think that Councillor Petrino was bringing the Scottish Government's competence into question nor their ability to move quickly, so I'll just leave that hanging there. SEPA, in my view, is the correct agency to enforce these issues, and they should be at the heart of any activities we take. We're best placed was the point that Councillor Petrino was making, parameters not addressed and that we won't be able to control it. I think that we'll be engaging very directly with the Scottish Government, saying what the communities want, what we want and what we expect the outcome to be. So I've got no compunction to not support the Labour Group amendment. That flaring is totally unacceptable. This has gone on far too long, and I think as a group we have to stand for our communities and say this is not good enough. I'm a little bit disappointed, just a little bit, but not at all surprised, that the opportunity to apologise for intemperate comments on Facebook was not taken by one of our members. For me, support the Labour amendment and let's move on.
Councillor Beacon.
In moving the original motion, Councillor Watt said that most of the community accept that flaring is necessary, and I think that's probably correct. However, the latest episode of flaring from the plant seems to have been a real tipping point for many in the local community. Following the last major episode, Leslie Laird MP took steps to bring all interested parties together, the companies, the community, regulators and local and national politicians. I managed to attend all but one of these meetings, and they had a real feeling of progress within them. The companies were coming across as being open and sincere about their efforts to try and end unplanned flaring. The events of the week following Easter Sunday have turned those feelings completely on their head. The reputation of the plant within not only the local community, but also much wider across Scotland, can only be described as being in tatters. Equally in the frame, I think, are SEPA and the government. SEPA need to step up and be clear with the community what the next steps are following their final written warning. I think the government need to step up and commit that any fines being imposed on the companies should be directed towards the local community as well as by way of compensation. An independent study must be commissioned and concluded speedily into the social, health and environmental impacts of the flaring, and the community need to be assured that the maintenance regimes within this ageing plant are fit for purpose. Finally, I think with the environmental concerns around global warming, I think it is time to begin a serious discussion about the actual existence of the plant as we attempt to move towards a renewables future and away from fossil fuels.
Councillor Campbell.
Thanks very much, David Provost. I think the majority of stuff that I'm going to say has probably already been said either this morning or with earlier parts of the motion. Like Councillor Watt and probably many of the other councillors in the ward, I had several calls and contacts through email, social media and whatever else regarding the safety and condition in the Mossmorran plant. Me personally, I'm obviously quite concerned regarding the amount of unnecessary flaring that there has been over the number of years. And I come from the mechanical industry, and I am duly concerned regarding the age of the plant going forward. As I asked the co-leaders this morning, SEPA have issued a final warning. How many final warnings are they going to really implement to operators of the site? SEPA really needs to come up to action here, being one of the governing bodies in the country, to hold them to account. Our MSPs, our constituent MSP, Annabel Ewan and Alec Riley, have raised this issue in Parliament, and I would understand several times, but more so recently. I have personally written to Rosanna Cunningham, the Minister, regarding and requesting an independent report sanctioned by the Scottish Government. The community which I've been elected to represent are done with this, absolutely done with it. And it's unacceptable, the noise that people had to put up with, the pollution, the lighting, which a massive impact. And only last night I attended the Glenfinnans Community Council, where it was raised whereby compensation was mentioned. And I welcome the Labour amendment regarding compensation going forward for all the local communities. But two things I'm going to come back with, but I'm going to say this one to start with. I had a mum contacted me and said, my bairn has asked me, the noise of the helicopter, is that what a war was like? That's how bad it was. I'm in Kelty and I'm 5 miles away from the site, maybe 6 miles away, and it's horrendous. Never mind the people who are staying on the doorstep. But Ross, you proposed your motion extremely well, and I would like to ask, I think all the groups here are saying we've got an issue with Mossmorran. I didn't do that for 1 minute, and we need to try and resolve the unplanned flaring. And Ross, you're asking for the council to lead on this, and I welcome your motion, but would ask you to consider working with the council and the Scottish Government together as a joined up working group to try and resolve this motion going forward. I would urge the Chamber to support the Labour motion. Thank you very much, David Provost.
Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Sorry about that. Right. This has been ongoing for many, many years. There has been flaring at Mossmorran for as long as I've lived in the area, which has got to be getting on for 30 years now. Is it time for the plant to close? I think the Labour Party themselves have said, not at the moment. Maybe not until 5 years, 10 years down the line. Maybe not until the oil is finished in the North Sea. Wait a long, long time for that. The plant is updated on a very, very regular basis. Maintenance is ongoing daily, every day. There are literally thousands of different parts to those plants. And if one of those systems, one of those parts goes down, the plant can go into a major disruption. The last one was due to the fact that their steam generator, or one of the steam generators, went down. And without the steam in the plant, you get vibration, noise, unbearable light from the stack. We all see it. What we need to do is encourage the company to do even more maintenance, to improve their maintenance, and to try and guarantee that we do not have any more flaring. Up until last night, I would have welcomed the Scottish Government having an investigation of some kind into the plant. I would still welcome it. But the idea that this council at committee can scrutinise both Shell and Exxon, could scrutinise SEPA, could have Fife Health Board here, and demand answers, appeals to me. And I think that it could appeal to a lot of the councillors sitting in here today. But that's a decision that's going to have to be made by ourselves here, whether we go for a Scottish Government investigation or whether we investigate this plant ourselves. But in the meantime, as the convener of Mossmorran and Braefoot Bay Safety and Communities Liaison Committee, I will continue to work with the plants, with that committee to improve the openness and information about the plants. Some of you may have noticed that the minutes of that committee are now, and have been for the last year and a half, available to view on Fife Direct. If you'll excuse me a second. Yeah. The committee has been asked to improve the information given out by the companies. This has been taken on board by both Shell and ExxonMobil. There have been several notices given out by Exxon during the last flaring event. I think everybody has noticed that. Along with the statements by SEPA. SEPA, in fact, have a great deal of information, reports, questions and answers on their website. We are updating this regularly. The questions are changing, and whenever somebody asks a question of SEPA, it will go on that site. It's something that's relatively new and something we should all welcome. It is my intention to keep on encouraging Shell and ExxonMobil to continue to be open, upfront and honest with the local communities. The plants are in the process of introducing a BAT, which is the best available technology assessment. That will hopefully improve the maintenance and the working with the communities. And finally, on Tuesday's meeting of the Mossmorran and Braefoot Bay Independent Air Quality Review Group, that group agreed to seek agreement from Fife Council to extend the scope of the group to include noise, light and vibration. That is a major step. Somebody has said it was a small step, but for Mossmorran, that is a major step. We have been trying for years, the Mossmorran Action Group has been trying for years to get Mossmorran to monitor these. Well, it looks like, and it's not definite yet, it may take council to step in and push it. it looks like that could come into being very shortly. And with that, I'd ask you to support the SNP motion, amendment, sorry.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm sure we're all aware of the public feeling on this issue for the last wee while. People no longer feel any trust in the safety group when investigating Mossmorran, especially when meetings are being held behind the closed doors. It's time we listen and act on those concerns. Now, it's not a bloody plane or a nuisance to do so. I believe only our motion, or along with one of the amendments, delivers on the public's wish. And I ask you to support the motion.
Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Yeah, as partners, we never really came close to getting a joint position, to be honest, for various reasons. But at this stage, and I'm just saying at this stage, I can't come close to talking about decommissioning at this stage. I just not yet. 200 jobs there. I mean, there's serious investment over the last year. I'm hearing there's going to be 5 years investment to come. I don't know where that news or would take us in terms of Fife internal investment in the future or wherever. I really kind of wish that wasn't there at all. I think it's a Fife job to start with. If we need to bring in the Scottish Government, we bring in the Scottish Government. Now, we're proud of our increasing effectiveness of the Fife Partnership. Well, this is a test for the Fife Partnership. Everything we need is here in Fife already, and we've got close working links. Anything else we need externally, we get it. And the company pay for it, or we get the Scottish Government involvement. I think that's the way to get things done now. I mean, I know we're promised jobs before. I mean, it was built with potential downstream development. That didn't happen. But we are here now. And I think our proposals here is a better chance of getting everybody around the same table under controlled conditions to a certain extent, and getting an honest debate with people, and going as far as we need to get this forward. We all share the problems in the area. That's how we do it, and I think everybody's agreed that we have to. I just think our way is the best. Thank you.
Councillor Brett.
Deputy Provost, thank you. We came here today thinking that we were dealing with a very short motion from the Conservatives, and it's grown with the two amendments. I think none of us can be in any doubt of the concern of the community. We've probably all had about 200 emails over the last few days. However, I mean, I wonder if I could ask the Chief Executive a question through you, Deputy Provost. My understanding of this is that the council does not actually have the powers to deal with this. The people who have the powers are SEPA, and SEPA report to the Scottish Government. Now, if they don't have enough powers to deal with this, then Parliament, whichever one, needs to give them the powers to deal with it. And I'm sorry that I'm maybe putting Steve on the spot, but I think this needs to be dealt with by the people who can have the powers to address it. Another small point, when I saw the motion, I wrote to the Director of Public Health and I asked her, what concerns have been brought to your attention about health issues with this plant? She replied this morning to say, yes, there had been various concerns raised over the years, but principally around the issue of cancer incidents. Nothing about any of the other health issues which colleagues have raised today. If there are those issues, they need to be drawn to her attention so that she can deal with them. And she can get in additional expert advice from Health Protection Scotland, who I used to work for many years ago, if she needs it. But I think the key question is, we're arguing about who is best placed to try and address this. I've given you my opinion, but I hope that the Chief Executive might be able to guide us here.
I'm happy to offer a comment, although I'm not sure that would be comprehensive in relation to the motions that are in front of you. What I would say is it is quite clear that the powers to take action in relation to some of the issues that have arisen and are arising rest with others rather than the Council, and principally SEPA and Scottish Government. However, that would not preclude the Council in commissioning an expert independent study to examine the issues that are occurring at this point in time.
Councillor Porteous.
Thank you, Deputy. I thank my colleague Councillor Tim Brett for asking that question and getting the response from the Chief Executive. There's no doubt around here, and those who are closest to it, and the people who are living in it, it is not right. It's simply not right. It's not the situation should arise. Flaring occurs where certain safety issues, and that's the reason for the flaring. But for it to be continual, and I have to say that I've only lived in this area 9 years, and we can see it for St Monans. So I do appreciate that. But I do tend to go with Councillor Vitreno and the SNP amendment, in the sense it seems to me a professional and measured approach to something which is serious, and which I hope that this whole full council will take in a serious matter. But when I hear the Labour Party saying they just want to close the plant, I'm thinking, no, that's not on. That's not on.
Point
that's
of explanation.
We need a measured approach, and I think that the Labour amendment in that sense is wrong.
Provost,
Sorry,
please. Can we ask
Councillor
the Speaker to withdraw that remark? That was never anything like what was proposed by the Labour Party.
Not entirely sure if that's correct. If you like to go back to what you said with regard to the... I'm not sure, but certainly in my... I mean, I'm quite a simple person, but decommissioning and closure seems to me to be the same word.
Provost, can I? Yeah, no. The words that were used there was the Labour Party wants to close the plant. What we've said in the motion is quite clear. We want to engage in discussions with those parties about a possible strategy for decommissioning. That is very different.
Right. The point of explanation has been made. Thank you. If we move on, Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah, thank you. Like every member in this chamber, I've received probably around 200 emails from members of the community expressing their views on this. Well, I'm sure some of them have just been clicked through, as they clearly all say the same thing. I'd like to draw the attention to the specific wording in those emails, which asks for help to push forward for an independent impact study, which sets out to investigate and quantify the environmental, health and social impacts within our communities from operations at Mossmorran. Now, the SNP amendment is the only one which mentions specifically the involvement of NHS Fife, which I think is really crucial. The email that we all received also goes on to say, as an elected representative of the people in our communities, with the power and authority to make a difference, please show your support. It goes on saying that, to ensure this overdue study is carried out by the appropriate bodies. Well, what better way to ensure that this is done than for the council to keep control of it, to be the commissioning body, rather than ask someone else to do it on our behalf. We would look to pull in all of the relevant bodies. Therefore, I think this sets out kind of the clearest way forward, the way forward that we've been asked to act on behalf of our communities, and we can take that action rather than handing it over to the Scottish Government. Thanks.
Can I ask members if they wish to have discussions during it to keep it at a low volume, because I'm struggling to hear over it. Councillor Backhouse.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I would just like to add in, I can only reaffirm the view that it is us, Fife Council, that should be driving forward any commissioning any report into the health, environmental and social impacts of the plant to the people in Fife. But I also want to raise and ask you to think about the workers that work at Mossmorran. Over 230 workers work at the plant, and they are working in a very highly regulated industry. The petrochemical plants here in Scotland have to meet stringent standards, stringent health and safety requirements, and health and safety is a reserved power to the UK government. We have the data for the last 40 years of operation through the NHS Fife reports on the health and well-being of our people here in Fife. We have the data for the workers that work in Mossmorran. So we need to support the expansion of the Mossmorran and Brayfruit Bay Independent Air Quality Review Group so that they can take into account the light, noise and distraction into their reporting system. And I have attended at those committee meetings, and it's not just Fife Council, or there are community council leads there as well as the NHS, not the NHS, sorry, the SEPA, and also the Mossmorran management are there as well. So it's a forum that is already in existence. If we can expand the remit of that committee, then that means Fife Council that can drive through and see what the information is and get those reports. And that's why I'm in favour of the SNP motion, and I would urge you to support it.
Thank you. I've got 6 councillors who have indicated that they wish to contribute. If you wish to contribute, can you put your hand up now if you're not within that? Councillor Leewald.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Deputy, I similarly agree with the last few speakers. Myself, along with Councillor Vitrano and various other councillors right across this chamber, as you know, have actually been attending the meetings of the working group that have been set up recently by Leslie Laird. Now, moving forward to what has actually just happened recently, and our mailboxes, as we all know, that we're absolutely, utterly inundated. But what I have to go back to is exactly what has been mentioned by, for instance, Councillor Sinclair. The wording that I'm getting from people is this community, our children, my neighbours, folk in Fife, our streets, our villages. People are actually, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about Fife. They're talking about the impact that this had on Fife. And I do believe that going along with what Councillor Vitrano has just mentioned, an independent study in Fife, these are the people, these are the agencies, this is the, it is here that this needs to be done. We've got the answers here in Fife. We can go to Fife NHS. We can get those stats on health, on children's stats. We can get every single piece of material right here in the heart of Fife to be able to take forward, analyse and see how we actually can progress this for the folk of Fife. Sadly, it may be affecting folk across the water, but primarily what we're being told literally on a daily basis is that this is affecting the folk of Fife. So for goodness sake, let's do it in Fife. Let's actually do that investigation here. Thank you.
Councillor Orton.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. What I'm hearing is that there's plenty of stats from NHS, SEPA. There's been plenty of meetings, plenty of reports. What the people are wanting is action. Therefore, whatever we recommend must be to an agency that can make action. SEPA do not have enforcement capabilities. They report to the government, to the Scottish Government. And it's the Scottish Government that acts on reports made by SEPA. We've already discussed the fact that this council does not have any enforcement capabilities. You can just make another report.
Deputy Provost, just can we clarify, and SEPA do have enforcement powers? Is that?
Well, it's my understanding that they don't. That it goes as far as final warnings.
Councillor Orton, quick clarification.
Yes,
Are you
I
able to
do
sit down,
have
Councillor Orton?
the regulatory body that can take enforcement action in certain circumstances.
They rarely do. They normally report it up.
But we continue with the
I'll
debate.
go back to what I was saying, that Fife Council most certainly doesn't have the capability. Yes, you can do another report, another investigation. The best way to do this is to get SEPA to report it to the Scottish Government and have the Scottish Government, who do have the ability to enforce this, to do it. The people want action, not another report.
Councillor Beer.
Thanks, Provost. I genuinely don't know how to follow that last one. SEPA don't have the powers. Oh, they do. Oh, well, they don't use them enough then. We have enough reports. We don't have enough reports. Let's get someone else to do a report for us. I mean, seriously. If we really, truly want to address the issues that are impacting on our concerns in our communities, and sometimes they might be unfounded concerns, sometimes they will be founded concerns. Nobody particularly wants a red light in the sky for 6 or 8 days and the noise that is associated with that. Absolutely not. But if we want the issues addressed, then there's no point in saying, can somebody else deal with it for us, please? Do we take responsibility for it, or do we do it ourselves? By asking somebody else to do it. In fact, I remember, was it last October, Councillor Dempsey condemned us all for writing to organisations elsewhere asking to do something about something else. And yet here he is asking us to do the same thing. We either take our responsibilities or we abrogate those responsibilities. I recall there was a change of administration here in 2012. And within a few weeks, a local quarry where there had been issues for some time in the community, the chief executive issued an instruction or tender or whatever else for an independent survey, and it took place, and there's been working groups, or not working groups, but a liaison committee meeting since then who work through those issues on a regular basis. There is nothing to stop the council commissioning a report. In fact, everybody has said they want to see eyeball to eyeball with all the relevant organisations. Well, that's exactly what the SNP amendment does. Councillor Vitrano has taken the lead and has said, I want to see these 3 organisations sitting in the chairs at the Environment and Scrutiny Committee, where all of the members of the committee, where all parties are represented, can eyeball them and ask them all of the questions that they would wish to ask. We are not, as many people have pointed out, the ones with enforcement powers. Others do, but we can take ownership and drive the solutions, because whatever has happened in the flaring the last few years or several years or decades hasn't brought a solution. And say we can kick it off to somebody else, let somebody else do it, or we can do it ourselves. Who's best placed to make representations on behalf of the people of Fife Council? Who's best to continue to try and drive a solution? It's Fife Council. If we want to take responsibility, let's take responsibility. Let's be grown up about it, and let's drive the solutions so that our communities don't have to sit with flaring. Now, if one of those solutions turns out to be Mossmorran needs storage tank, because I'm sure they don't want to be burning oil up into the air, because that's literally burning money. They'd be like me leaving the shower on all day. I'm sure the rest of the family would not be happy about it. So it's not in anybody's interest to flare. It's how we drive the solution forward. And if Fife Council as the body takes ownership of it, I believe that's the best way to drive the solution forward, and not ask somebody else to take the responsibility on our behalf.
Councillor Lothian.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm personally in a quandary here, because I come to this chamber today with the motion as set out. I knew there was an issue at Mossmorran, but living some miles away, it wasn't, and in a different area, it wasn't immediately apparent the extent of that problem. And it's only today, with what I've heard from various people, that I now do appreciate the extent. Kelty and thousands of homes, etc., etc. So it's maybe unfortunate that such a huge issue over so many years is just all of a sudden the only information I've had about it is really what I should have maybe read in the papers or made more inquiries, but it has bounced to me in one fell swoop. There's a huge issue here that I didn't seem to know anything about. I feel a bit ashamed. I did see a slight glow over the Lomans at one point, but when you're 20 miles away from something, it's you know. So I'm cold, and I'm not sure what to do. So that's my position. It's either well, hot in here, yeah. It's either the motion or the amendments, and I'm asking questions about the amendments. I'm asking the SNP is to commission an independent expert study, and I'm thinking, gosh, this strikes me as going to have a large pound sign with lots of money. I'm independent. That means we've got to employ somebody. We're going to commission something we're not going to pay for. I'm not quite sure. I'm just asking myself the question, how does this work? We're going to commission something, lots of experts that charge thousands of pounds a day, and someone else is going to pay for it. So I'm just, yeah. So I'm asking myself the question, and you're maybe, you know, giving me the answer. We're going to commission something that we're not going to pay for at all. I'm looking at the Labour. But this is the problem I have. I'm trying
Excuse
to
me,
me,
can we respect the fact that someone's speaking?
I'm looking at the
Thank you.
Labour amendment, and it says seek appropriate and substantial compensation from companies. Now, does that mean we take legal action, or does it mean we just sort of ask nicely? Well, I mean, that's what I mean. I don't know what it means. Substantial compensation for the thousands of people involved, and substantial compensation strikes me as being millions, if not tens of millions of pounds. And it's going to seek it, but I don't know what it means. If I was to seek compensation from Councillor Ross, I would do two ways. I'd say, could you give me substantial compensation, or I'd take you to court. The answer to the first one would be go away. The second one. So I'm asking these questions because I'm not sure what the actual meaning and behind what I might be agreeing to is. And so that's the problem I have. I'm tempted to think if we could all go away and actually have a proper understanding of all the issues and come back at another date, we might be better placed. So I'm only expressing my views because I'm partly trying to make up my mind on something very significant, and I am not cited on all the information on this very important subject that may have financial consequences for this council, but it's not clear. There's not going to be a penny it's going to cost in any sense. Well, that's reassuring. So there is no budget attached to this council with regard to any of these. That is what I'm getting nodded around. Okay, well, that's helpful if that could have been said in the first place. Now I've got to make up my mind what to do. Thank you. I did mention the motion. I told you I don't know how to vote.
Councillor Manekshaw.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We've heard various people today say that these issues have been long-standing. 40 years the plant's been running. These are not new issues. Clearly, the last major flaring incident is something that has provoked a lot of angst and anger. But then people are entitled to ask. For 40 years this has been going on, and Fife Council did nothing about it. Or what did they do? And why is it only now that we are willing to go away and investigate this? Why weren't we investigating this before? And I think that's a very valid question. Why haven't we investigated this before? Why is this a sudden new idea that suddenly bursts forth into the light of day? And the second point I would make is that only this morning, co-leader made his normal dig about, here we are, ask for things to be done, where's the money coming from? Independent reports, especially when we're talking about the kinds of things we need to do, sound, vibration, chemical analysis, various things, these things don't come cheaply. You're talking about at least, conservatively, £250,000, probably £500,000. Where's that going to come from? Do we just assume that Exxon will just pony up with the money? So where does the money come from to fund this wonderful proposal that we're going to suddenly investigate? Thank you.
Councillor Haldane.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Well, today we've debated this and debated it, and I think we're all on the same wavelength. We agree on the basics of the issue, and the difference being is how we get to the bottom of it and how we go ahead with it. On a slightly different thing, we all know fossil fuels are major polluters. The UK government has announced the UK will be world leaders in reducing pollution by closing plants like this by 2050. The SNP are looking to open up major oil wells. So does this mean they support Mossmorran? This is unacceptable and hypocritical. Support the Labour amendment. Thank you.
Councillor McClinsky.
Thank you. Very briefly, I have to say what Councillor Brett said about who's got the expertise. I think what we're all trying to figure out is, will it be independent? So there'll be no question about what the conclusion they're coming to. Will it be done by experts? And will it be given to the people who have the power to actively sort this out in the shortest possible time frame? I'm suspicious at the enthusiasm the SNP are showing for wanting to have control of this. I think Fife Council have a very real role, but I have to say that our motion and the elements of the Labour amendment, which includes numbers 1, 2 and 3, absolutely 100% supporting those, and that's issue about 4 and 5. But on balance, it's somewhere between our motion and their amendment, which I think works for the problem that we're facing. Thank you.
Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I actually wasn't going to get on top, but now listening to everybody else, I thought to myself, why not? Even if we do produce this study, we'll have to go to the Scottish Government anyway, along with SEPA and the rest of the action groups that's there. Why not just get them all on board, do it jointly? The scale and the effect of the study is significant. The Scottish Government is best placed to do this study. They have the resources to bring all this together, so it's down to the Scottish Government to do this, not us as a council. I support Labour motion. Amendment to me.
Final contribution in the debate, Councillor Docherty.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just to basically answer the query about the funding, apparently ExxonMobil has said the independent review group will provide the funding, and we are actually hopeful that the monitoring will be done by the council. Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask Councillor Watt to sum up.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and thank you to all those who have stood up today and spoke passionately on behalf of local residents. There's been some very good contributions and left us in no doubt how important this issue is to residents in my ward and beyond. Admittedly though, while we expected a strengthened amendment, we were especially surprised to see one tabled by each of the equal partners in the coalition. However, despite assurances given by the SNP councillors online that they agreed that while the motion was a good start, there were aspects that could in fact be strengthened, and hope we can come to a cross-party consensus on a call for action and take forward specific points. But this SNP amendment is hugely disappointment, and not just for me, but the thousands of local residents who have been deeply affected by this recent unplanned flaring. You have failed to convince me, you have failed to convince my colleagues, you failed to convince your equal partners, and you will now have great difficulty explaining yourselves to the wider public. On that basis, having listened to the debate, we as a group have agreed to accept the Labour amendment. They have acknowledged our motion and have indeed strengthened it. At the end of the day, this isn't about a Conservative motion or a Labour and SNP amendment. This is about properly representing the views and concerns of the people of Fife and addressing them effectively, and we fully accept the Labour amendment. Thank you.
Now move to vote.
Point of order, Deputy Provost. In accordance with Standing Order 10.3, I request that the vote is taken by calling the roll.
Have you got a seconder? Councillor Dempsey.
I'll second that.
There now needs to be a vote on whether or not to take the vote by a roll call. Can I see those in favour of a roll call vote, please? Yeah. And those against? A roll call vote will now be taken.
Yeah, Councillor Ross, are you happy to conjoin? Yes, he is.
So the vote will be either for the second amendment, that was as proposed by Councillor Vitrano and seconded by Councillor Barrett, or the original motion proposed by Councillor Watt and seconded by Councillor Green, as conjoined with the first amendment proposed by Councillor David Ross and seconded by Councillor Erskine. So we'll just go through and call the names, and what we're looking for is motion or second amendment when your name's called. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Backhouse. Councillor Bain. Councillor Barrett. Councillor Beer. Councillor Brett.
Motion.
Councillor Caldwell. Councillor Ian Cameron. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Cleland. Councillor Connor. Councillor Craik. Councillor Davidson. Councillor Dempsey. Councillor Docherty. Councillor Ellis. Councillor Erskine. Councillor Ford. Councillor Graham. Councillor Grant. Councillor Green. Councillor Greakin. Councillor Haldane. Councillor Hall-Muir. Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Hisbent. Councillor Langlands. Councillor Law. Councillor Leslie's gone. Councillor Leewald. Councillor Lindsay. Councillor Liston. Councillor Lothian. Councillor McDermott. Councillor Manickshaw. Councillor Marjoram. Councillor McClinsky. Councillor Noble. Councillor Nolan. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Orton. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Purchas. Councillor Ritchie. Councillor David Ross. Councillor David J. Ross. Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Steele. Councillor Sutty. Councillor Tepp. Councillor Werner. Councillor Veracchia. Councillor Vitrano. Councillor Darren-Watt. Councillor Richard Watt. And Councillor Wincott. Thank you. You just bear with us while we do the arithmetic. Votes for the motion 32, votes for the second amendment 23, so the conjoined motion and first amendment is carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Now on to the final motion